you ever wonder why a message so pure, so peaceful, so rooted in mercy and truth was met with such violent hatred? From the very first moment the Qur'an was revealed, Islam wasn't just ignored, it was attacked. And the question is why? Why? Does truth always trigger enemies? It's because truth doesn't just inform, it challenges. It confronts the ego. It rewrites power structures. It dethrones false gods and exposes hidden corruption. And that makes people nervous. That makes tyrants panic. That makes elites lose sleep. From the first revelation in the cave of Hera, a war was ignited. Not a war of swords at first, but a war of ideas, of influence, of hearts and minds. And Allah, in His infinite wisdom, didn't just arm the Prophet with verses of worship and belief. He gave him warning signs, psychological blueprints, profiles of the very types of people who would rise to destroy him. Because the enemies of truth aren't new, they follow patterns. And Allah revealed those patterns from day one so that the Prophet and us could recognize them when they show up in our lives, in our communities, and on the world stage. One of the first types of enemy Allah revealed is the one that's hard to hate because on the surface he doesn't look evil. In fact, he looks honorable, respected, a leader, a man of tradition. This enemy fights truth not because he's greedy or vulgar, but because he believes he's right. He's not trying to destroy society. He thinks he's protecting it. He's trying to save the system, preserve the values, uphold the legacy of the past. He sees the truth not as light, but as a threat to national identity, a threat to family heritage, a threat to the way things have always been done. This enemy is smart, proud, and loyal, not to Allah, but to his tribe, his culture, his nation. He's not shameless, he's principled. And that's what makes him so dangerous. Because when he wages war against the believers, he's not doing it with lies, he's doing it with conviction. He's not trying to get rich or gain clout. He thinks he's doing the right thing. That enemy in the time of the Prophet Pounds was Abu Yal wasn't a thug or a fool. He was a man of status, intellect, and leadership. He was the kind of figure people trusted, the kind of voice they followed, and he saw the Prophet as a problem, not because he doubted the Prophet's truthfulness, but because he knew what the message meant. Islam wasn't just a new belief system, it was a disruption. It questioned the Croatia's idols. It challenged the elite's power. It called for equality between slave and master. It told the rich to share their wealth. It told leaders that they were not gods, they were servants of God. And Abu Yal couldn't let that slide. Not because he was confused, but because he understood exactly what was happening. This is the kind of enemy that doesn't insult you. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't mock your beliefs. He looks you in the eye and says, I love this country. I love my people, and I won't let your ideas destroy it. He calls you a threat to peace, a danger to unity, a radical voice, and in his mind, he's not suppressing truth. He's saving society. His war against Islam is wrapped in flags, in constitutions, in political speeches. He speaks of stability, order, preservation, but beneath that cloak is fear. The fear of losing control. The fear that revelation might liberate those he wants to keep in chains. Abu Yal, the so-called guardian of tradition, wasn't just fighting Muhammad, he was fighting change. And that war continues today. Because today's Abu-Jals don't wear robes and sit in tribal councils. They wear suits, they run think tanks, they write policy, they lead protests, and they fight not with swords, but with narratives, with laws, with media, with language. But the DNA is the same loyalty to old systems, the same pride, human power, the same resistance to divine light. And just like back then, their enemy isn't the Muslim, it's the message, it's La. Because that sentence doesn't just free souls, it breaks idols, it unseats tyrants, and to the Abu Jahl types of the world, that makes it dangerous. They don't want the truth to be silenced. They want it to go away, but they can't kill it. So, they brand it, they reframe it. They call it backward, regressive, extreme. And in doing so, they fulfill the exact prophecy the Qur'an revealed more than 400 years ago. But here's the most terrifying part. The Abuja type isn't always your enemy from outside. Sometimes it's the leader within. The uncle, the scholar, the advisor who warns against extremism when what he really fears is sincerity, who tells you to avoid controversial topics when what he really means is don't challenge power, who claims to speak for peace but never speaks for justice. These aren't villains twirling their mustaches. They're upstanding citizens, but they hate the fire of truth because it melts their frozen worldview. They hate the Qur'an not because it confuses them, but because it exposes them. And Allah warned us. He told us to look beyond the smiles and speeches, to measure a person not by their status but by their submission, not by their patriotism, but by their prostration, because when Islam comes to challenge a society, the first to stand against it are often the ones who think they're saving that society from collapse. And that's why Abu Jahl was the first enemy revealed in the Qur'an, not because he was the worst, but because he was the most common. And the moment we stopped recognizing him, we become easy prey for him. If Abu Jahl was the enemy who masked his rejection of truth in the language of dignity and patriotism, then Abu Lahab was the exact opposite. He didn't hide. He didn't pretend. His hatred was loud, vulgar, and celebrated. He was the kind of enemy who took pride in his opposition to Islam. When the Prophet stood on Mount Safira to call the people to Allah, Abu Lahab didn't wait. He didn't strategize. He didn't analyze. He shouted in public, "Taiban laka, may you be ruined," and walked away, mocking the most important message humanity had ever heard. And what did he mock it for? Not because it was confusing, not because he misunderstood, but because it came from his own family. Pride, arrogance, ego. Abu Lahab saw truth, recognized it, and spat on it, because accepting it meant admitting that his nephew, an orphan raised in his household, was now spiritually above him, and that was a humiliation his pride could never tolerate. Abu Lahab wasn't known for intellect or policy or strategy. He was known for something worse, shamelessness. He was the kind of man who, when the Prophet's infant son died, celebrated it. He danced and clapped and declared, "Now Muhammad's name will die with him." Can you imagine that kind of evil? To celebrate the death of a baby just to hurt the father? This isn't political opposition. This is spiritual rot. He didn't oppose Islam because he feared it. He opposed it because he hated that he wasn't the center of it. His heart wasn't corrupted by ideology. It was corrupted by narcissism. And his wife, wasn't any better. A woman of wealth and status, she used her influence to insult, sabotage, and slander the Prophet at every chance. She would literally scatter thorny branches in his path to hurt him. Petty acts driven by a hatred so irrational, so venomous that Allah revealed an entire surah about their doom. Tabat yada Abi Watab. But here's what's terrifying. Abu Lahab wasn't a social outcast. He was admired, respected, rich, handsome, part of Makkah's elite. He and his wife were the power couple of their day. People envied them. They dressed well, hosted lavish events, and always seemed confident and in control. Yet behind the glamour was a black hole of morality. Their mouths were filthy, their actions cruel. They were bullies with charm. And the Qur'an didn't describe them just to condemn them. It described them so we could spot them. Because Abu Lahab is not a historical figure. He's a recurring virus in every society. You see him in celebrities who use their platforms to ridicule religion, in influencers who make faith look silly, in businessmen who hoard wealth, mock the poor, and brag about their status, in public. Figures who insult prophets for entertainment. These aren't intellectual critics. They're not philosophers. They're just loud, wealthy, arrogant, and deeply insecure. Islam threatens their image. Because Islam says, you are nothing without tawwa, without sincerity, without submission. And that terrifies those whose only worth comes from public applause. Abu Lahab's legacy survives in every timeline where mockery becomes a weapon, where foul speech is celebrated, and where the truth is attacked, not with arguments, but with laughter. And don't think the Ummah is safe just because we can spot him in the media. Sometimes he exists in our own homes. A cousin who mocks the practicing one, a colleague who jokes about hijab, a boss who makes fun of people praying at work. These are not harmless words. These are echoes of Abu Lahab. And unless we recognize that filth doesn't always look like filth, sometimes it's wrapped in fashion, fame, and charm, we will fall into their trap, laughing alongside them while they burn. Everything sacred. Now, if Abu Yal was the noble opponent and Abu Lahab the shameless one, then the third type of enemy is far more dangerous because this enemy hides everything behind a smile. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't mock your faith. He praises it, compliments it, invites it to the table, offers you a handshake, and then quietly rewrites the rules to destroy it. In the Qur'an, this enemy is represented by Alw or Mura, and what made him terrifying wasn't his aggression, but his intelligence. He wasn't a brawler, he was a strategist. When the Qur'an began shaking Mecca, the leaders panicked. They couldn't ignore it, and their usual insults weren't working. So they turned to one man, the one whose mind they trusted most to find a solution. W listened to the Qur'an not once, not quickly, but deeply. He reflected on its rhythm, its structure, its impact. And then he said something that no other enemy dared say. This is not the word of man. He admitted it. He knew it. But then came the moment of calculation. If I accept this, I lose power. I lose my clients, my contracts, my influence, my seat at the table. If I oppose it, I might risk being wrong, but at least I keep everything. And so he rejected what he knew was true, not out of disbelief, but out of greed. And here's what makes his type of enemy so deadly. He doesn't oppose Islam openly. He pretends to support it, but behind closed doors, he twists its message. He packages new ideas as reforms. He funds programs that dilute core beliefs. He praises moderation, but hates conviction. He'll sponsor Islamic conferences, then ensure the speakers are filtered. He'll support charity work, then quietly influence the direction of sermons. His goal isn't to destroy Islam overnight. It's to reshape it, water it down, redesign it into something that threatens no one and benefits him. And today, these enemies don't come as individuals. They come as foundations, as institutions, as allies. They write glowing articles about progressive Islam. They promote voices who speak only of rituals but never of justice, who speak of peace but never of Tot, who remove jihad from the seer and hellfire from the cut bars. They'll praise the Prophet but never the parts of his life that dealt with power, with leadership, with confrontation. They want Islam, but only the version that fits their plan. A religion of private worship, not public transformation. And just like WID, they don't say, I hate Islam. They say, we love Islam, but it needs to evolve and we fall for it. Because their words are soft, their faces familiar, their tone respectful, but their intentions rotten. Allah exposed WED in great detail. His family background, his wealth, his sons, his success, his calculations, because this kind of enemy requires exposure. He is too smooth, too charming, too persuasive to be left unexamined. He will always be around, whispering, negotiating, offering deals. You can keep your Islam, he says. Just leave out the parts that threaten the system. And if we agree, we've lost not our lives, but our faith. This is why Allah gave us these three profiles. Because every generation of Muslims will face them again. The one who believes he's defending tradition while resisting the truth. The one who spits hatred and thinks his power protects him. And the one who calculates, smiles, and manipulates Islam for his gain. These are not fairy tale villains. These are real, and they're now. Our only defense is to recognize them before we shake their hand. To know their traits before we applaud their speeches, and to stand firm not just against the swords of the past, but the strategies of the present. Because in this age, the enemy doesn't always come to fight, sometimes he comes to fund the Qur'an. It's not just a book of worship, it is a book of warfare, not in the way people misunderstand it, but in the way that matters most: battle between truth and falsehood, between clarity and confusion, between revelation and manipulation. When the Qur'an was revealed, it didn't just teach us how to pray, it taught us how to think. It taught us how to observe, analyze, and defend the truth in a world designed to blur it. It trained the Prophet, not just spiritually, but strategically. And that training wasn't reserved for him. It was passed down to the Ummah, to you, to me. Because this deen is not passive. It's not meant to sit quietly in the corners of our hearts while the world burns with lies. It was meant to rise, to respond, to expose, and to lead. From the earliest surahs, Allah laid out the playbook. He gave names, behaviors, reactions. He showed us how enemies operate, how they speak, how they plan, how they smile while stabbing. And it's astonishing when you realize every detail about Abu Lahab, Abu Yal, and WED wasn't revealed after years of conflict. It was revealed early, before the battles, before the boycotts, before the blood, because the Qur'an wasn't reacting to history. It was predicting it, warning us, giving us X-ray vision to see beneath the surface of society. This is not just a book of rituals, it's a shield, a sword, a lens. And the moment we stop using it that way, we become vulnerable. We start thinking the enemy is only someone who curses us openly. But the Qur'an teaches us sometimes the greatest threats were the kindest smiles, and sometimes the biggest dangers are not the ones attacking the outside of Islam, but the ones quietly altering the inside. Look at how the Qur'an frames hypocrisy. It doesn't just say, beware the disbelievers. It says the hypocrites are in the lowest depths of the fire. Because a clear enemy is one thing, but a fake friend who pretends to be on your side while poisoning your foundation, that's far worse. That's the strategy that destroys nations from within. So when you open the Qur'an, don't just look for comfort. Look for clarity. Ask yourself, who are the Abu Yals today? Who are the ones hiding behind legacy and tradition while resisting the message? Who are the Abu Lahabs? Loud, vulgar, arrogant, proud of their sin and rebellion. And more importantly, who are the WIDs, the soft-spoken manipulators who twist Islamic values while pretending to preserve them. Once you begin seeing the world through this lens, everything changes. The news looks different. The speeches sound different. The influences you once followed seem hollow. The campaigns that once moved you now seem suspicious. And that's the power of Quranic training. It doesn't make you cynical. It makes you aware. It doesn't tell you to hate people. It tells you to understand their motives, their methods, their masks. It teaches you to love justice more than comfort, to love Allah's guidance more than public approval. Because the Qur'an doesn't train cowards. It trains leaders, shepherds, defenders of truth. But here's the question. What good is all this training if we don't use it, if we memorize verses, but forget what they're for? If we decorate our homes with ayat while ignoring the strategies they reveal? What good is knowing Surah Lahab if we still fall for celebrity culture? What good is knowing the story of Wed if we still sell out our principles for status, followers, or likes? What good is studying the Prophet's battles if we avoid every conflict that challenges our comfort? The Qur'an isn't just to be read, it's to be lived. Its analysis of enemies isn't entertainment. It's a call to intelligent resistance. And this leads to the most critical part of all. What do we do now, if we know that these three enemies still exist in every age? If we know they're not just out there, but often disguised as allies, then what's our response? It's not fear, it's not retreat, it's preparation, it's strength, it's confidence rooted in revelation. Because Allah didn't expose these enemies to frighten us, He exposed them to arm us, to make us unshakable, to make us walk through a world of confusion with our eyes open and our heads high. The Prophet was told about his enemies before he met them, so that when they came, he would recognize them. And that is our legacy too. Don't be the person who memorizes the names of enemies in history but can't identify the same tactics in the present. Don't be the ummah that romanticizes the past but sleeps through the same battles today. Abu Jahl is here. Abu Lahab is trending. Wed is consulting for policy. They haven't vanished. They've rebranded. The faces are new. But the games are old. And Allah already told us how to win. Not with reaction, but with recognition. Not with rage, but with revelation. Not by copying their strategies, but by standing firm in ours. So now you have to ask yourself, are you trained by the Qur'an or just entertained by it? Do you study its patterns only to pass exams, or do you use them to protect your soul, your family, your community? Because we are not a people of blindness. We are a people of insight. We were given light, but light is useless if your eyes are shut. And worse, if your eyes are wide open, but your heart refuses to see. Victory in Islam never begins on the battlefield. It begins in vision. The ability to see falsehood for what it is, no matter how beautiful it looks. The ability to detect hypocrisy even when it's dressed in sincerity. The ability to love truth more than popularity, more than power, more than peace, and that kind of vision, it only comes from the Qur'an, not from scrolling, not from headlines, not from trendsetters, but from divine light consistently, fearlessly, unapologetically followed. So next time you open the Qur'an, don't just ask what the verse means. Ask what the verse wants from you. Ask what part of the world it's trying to unveil, what trap it's trying to warn you about, what type of enemy it's asking you to recognize before it's too late. Because if we truly take the Qur'an as our guide, then no enemy can surprise us, no deception can last, and no manipulation can shake us. That's what it means to be people of the book. That's what it means to be people of La ilaha, eyes open, heart firm, feet planted, no matter who smiles at you, no matter who threatens you. Because when Allah trains you through His words, you don't flinch.